Long ago, in a small village by the edge of a great forest, there lived a woman named Amina. She was a humble soul, with hands that were as gentle as the wind and a heart as warm as the midday sun. Amina was known throughout the village not just for her kindness, but for her wisdom and her remarkable ability to help anyone in need. Whether it was fixing a broken tool, tending to the sick, or offering guidance to those lost in their hearts, Amina was the one people turned to. The village, nestled between the tall trees and wide rivers, was a peaceful place. The sounds of birds singing in the morning and the rustling of the leaves in the evening were constant companions. Yet, as peaceful as the village seemed, the people had their own struggles: droughts, hunger, and occasionally an unexpected visitor who would bring trouble. But through it all, Amina's presence was a steady reminder that no matter the adversity, kindness would always find a way. One day, as Amina worked by the riverside, she heard a sound that seemed out of place, a low hum followed by the gentle grinding of metal. She turned her head and saw a large, dusty car coming down the narrow road leading into the village. It was an unfamiliar sight, and the villagers had not seen many cars in their time. The car looked as though it had been on a long journey, its paint faded by the sun, the wheels worn thin by rough roads. The car came to a slow stop in front of Amina's humble hut, and out of it stepped a man who seemed as out of place as the vehicle itself. The man was tall and dressed in fine clothes that seemed too new for such a remote village. His hair was dark and neatly combed, and he wore a pair of sunglasses that hid his eyes. His gaze swept over the village, pausing for a moment on Amina, who was still kneeling by the river, washing her clothes. He walked over to her, his footsteps soft in the quiet of the afternoon. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, his voice smooth and confident. "I'm in a bit of trouble. My car broke down, and I seem to be far from the nearest mechanic. I wonder if you could help me." Amina stood up, brushing the dust off her hands and looking at the man with curiosity. "I am not a mechanic, sir, but I can help in many ways. What seems to be the problem with your car?" The man, who introduced himself as Malik, looked down at the vehicle, his expression filled with frustration. "I don't know. It just stopped, right in the middle of the road. And now, no matter how much I try, it won't start again. I don't know what else to do." Amina smiled gently. "Perhaps we can take a look together. Sometimes all it takes is a little understanding and patience." Malik raised an eyebrow, surprised at Amina's calmness. He was used to people being either impressed by his wealth or rushing to help him, but Amina's demeanor was different. She was not fazed by his fine clothes, nor was she eager to please him. There was a quiet strength in her, one that did not rely on the material world. "Very well," Malik said, slightly bemused. "But if you can't fix it, I'll have to call someone from the city." Amina nodded and walked towards the car. As she inspected the engine, Malik stood nearby, arms crossed, watching her with growing interest. He had expected the woman to be helpless, perhaps a little flustered by the complexity of the machine. But Amina was unfazed. She worked with a calmness that seemed to belong to another time. Her hands, worn but steady, moved expertly over the engine, and she muttered soft words to herself, as though speaking to the car itself. "There is a simple blockage here," she said, pointing to a small part of the engine. "Sometimes all it takes is a little clearing for the path to open." Malik watched in amazement as Amina worked. He had expected this to be a long and difficult process, but the way she handled the situation seemed almost magical. She wasn't just fixing a car, she was mending something deeper, something unseen. As Amina continued her work, Malik couldn't help but notice the people of the village watching from a distance. Their faces were kind, their eyes filled with curiosity, but none approached. It was as if they had seen this before, this woman, this quiet magic. After a few moments, Amina looked up and smiled. There, that should do it. She wiped her hands on her skirt and stood back. Malik, still skeptical, got into the driver's seat and turned the key. To his surprise, the engine roared to life. The car purred smoothly, as if it had never broken down at all. He sat back, his mouth slightly open in disbelief. "How did you do that?" he asked, astonished. Amina smiled. "It is not magic, Malik. It is understanding. Sometimes the simplest things are the most powerful. The car just needed a little care, a little patience." Malik, still taken aback by her words, hesitated for a moment. Then, with a smile, he said, "You know, I'm not just some random traveler. I'm someone who has a lot to offer. Wealth, status, power. I could reward you greatly for what you've done." But Amina only shook her head. "I do not need wealth or status, Malik. What I have is enough. What I offer is my heart, and I offer it freely. True wealth lies in what you can give, not what you can keep."
Malik was quiet for a long moment. There was something in Amina's words that struck him deeply, something he had not considered in all his years of running after success and riches. But he didn't know how to respond, so he simply said, "Thank you, Amina. You've given me more than I could have ever imagined." Amina nodded and turned to leave, but before she did, she spoke again. "Remember this, Malik. A heart full of greed will always be empty, but a heart full of giving will never run dry." And with that, she walked away, her figure disappearing into the heart of the village. But what Malik didn't know was that this simple act of kindness would soon lead him down a path that would change his life forever, and what happened next would leave him speechless. Malik stood in the same spot for a long time after Amina left, staring at the engine of the car that now purred like a satisfied lion. He was amazed, no, astounded, by what he had just witnessed. He had traveled the world, met the wealthiest and most powerful people, yet never had anyone left such an impression on him. There was something about Amina, something different. It wasn't just her ability to fix the car, it was her calm presence, her wisdom, and the way she carried herself with such grace, even in the face of adversity. He had never known anyone who gave so freely, so selflessly.
He shook his head, still unsure of what to make of it. "What's going on with me?" he muttered to himself, standing beside the car. For a moment, he almost considered staying in the village longer. Maybe there was something here that he had missed in all his years of chasing wealth. Maybe he was searching for something more than riches. But then, as quickly as the thought had come, it vanished. Malik's ambitions resurfaced. He was a businessman, a man who had built his empire from the ground up. He had goals, things to accomplish. And this village, this peaceful, unassuming place, was nothing more than a brief detour on his journey. He had to return to his life, to the world where power and money ruled. Still, something gnawed at his mind, like an unanswered question as he climbed back into the car and began the drive back to the city. The village, with its simple beauty and its kind people, lingered in his thoughts. As he drove, Malik's thoughts turned to the offer he had made to Amina. He had been half serious when he offered her wealth in return for helping him, but now, the more he thought about it, the more he realized that his offer had been a reflection of his own pride. He was so used to people accepting his gifts, his influence, and his money that he had not considered for a second that Amina might not want any of it. He had never met anyone like her, and it troubled him. Why didn't she want what he had to offer? What was it that she had that made her so content with just the simple life of the village? In the days that followed, Malik couldn't shake the thoughts of Amina and her peaceful ways.
He began to think of her constantly, her words echoing in his mind. True wealth lies in what you can give, not what you can keep. The phrase haunted him, and a strange sense of emptiness settled in his chest. It was as if everything that he had worked for, his wealth, his power, was ultimately hollow. A week passed before Malik made up his mind. He would return to the village. But this time, it was not for help with his car. This time, he wanted to understand Amina. He wanted to learn why she was content with what she had, and why her heart seemed full, while his own felt like it was lacking something. He packed a bag with a few essentials and set off once more, driving through the dusty roads, the sound of the car's tires echoing in the otherwise still air. As he neared the village, his heart began to race, a mixture of excitement and nervousness rising within him. He wondered if Amina would even recognize him, if she would remember the man who had offered her wealth and power only to leave without a second thought. When he arrived at the village, it was just as he remembered it. The children were playing by the river, their laughter rising into the air like the song of birds. The elders sat under the shade of the trees, speaking in low tones, their faces etched with years of wisdom. And then, in the distance, he saw her, Amina. She was standing by the well, speaking to an elderly woman, her face serene and untroubled. For a moment, Malik simply stood there, watching her. The way she moved, the way she spoke, there was a quiet power in her that he couldn't ignore. He felt a sudden rush of admiration for her, and it humbled him. He approached slowly, unsure of how to begin. Amina turned as he neared, her eyes locking onto his with that same gentle smile. "Malik," she said, as though his return was no surprise, "what brings you back?" I don't know," Malik admitted, a rare honesty in his voice. "I came to see you, to understand. Well, to understand what it is that makes you so different from everyone I've ever known. You live a life that seems so peaceful, so full. And well, I don't have that. I thought wealth would bring me happiness, but it hasn't. It's left me empty." Amina studied him for a long moment, her expression softening. "You have wealth, Malik, but you also have a restless heart. The world will give you all that you ask for, but if your heart is not in balance, it will never be enough." Malik frowned. "I've spent my whole life chasing more power, more success, more recognition, and I've built a great empire. But it feels hollow." "Have you ever stopped to ask yourself why?" Amina asked, her voice low but full of wisdom. Malik swallowed hard. "I don't know. Maybe I've been chasing something I don't truly need." Amina nodded as if she had expected this. She sat down on a nearby stone, patting the ground beside her. "Come, sit with me. Let me tell you a story, one that might help you understand." Malik hesitated for a moment, but then, compelled by the deep sense of calm that radiated from Amina, he sat down beside her. "Long ago," she began, "in a distant land, there was a mighty king who had everything: riches, power, and control over vast lands. But despite all of his wealth, the king was always restless. No matter how many treasures he accumulated, he could not find peace. So he called his advisors together and demanded they find a way to give him rest. One of his wise elders told him, 'Your heart is like a river, my king. The more you try to fill it, the more it grows restless. Only when you learn to let the river flow naturally will you find peace.' The king did not understand, so he continued to gather more wealth. But in the end, the wealth did nothing to quiet the storm within his heart. It was only when he gave freely to his people, when he shared his riches and listened to the needs of others, that his heart became still."
Malik listened intently, his mind racing. There was something about the story, something that resonated deeply within him. He looked at Amina, and for the first time he realized that she was not just a woman of the village. She was a guide, someone who understood the balance between giving and receiving in a way he had never considered. Amina finished the story with a soft sigh. The king's heart was finally at peace because he learned that wealth, true wealth, lies in what you can give to others, not what you keep for yourself. Malik sat there in silence, the weight of Amina's words settling deeply into his soul. He felt as though a veil had been lifted from his eyes.
But little did he know, this understanding would soon lead him down a path that would challenge everything he thought he knew about life, wealth, and the true meaning of happiness. The days that followed were filled with a deep internal struggle for Malik. The simple wisdom Amina had shared with him seemed to reverberate in his heart, growing louder with each passing moment. He had spent his entire life focused on accumulating wealth and power, convinced that these were the keys to happiness. But now his heart felt heavy with the realization that he had been chasing the wrong things. The hollow feeling that had plagued him for so long was now more apparent than ever, and he couldn't ignore it any longer. Every time he walked through the village, he saw the people in a different light. The elders sitting around the fire, the children laughing as they played by the river, and even the workers who tended to the crops. They all had something he lacked: peace, contentment, a deep sense of connection to the world around them. It was as though the village itself was alive with something Malik couldn't quite name, but knew he wanted to understand. It wasn't long before Malik found himself seeking out Amina again. This time, there was no grand gesture, no offer of wealth or power. He simply needed to talk. He needed her guidance. As he walked toward her home, his heart pounded with the weight of the question he had to ask. When he arrived, Amina was sitting outside, her back to the sun, weaving a basket from reeds. She smiled as he approached, a quiet welcome in her eyes. She had become, to Malik, something of a spiritual guide, though he had yet to fully understand why. Her presence was comforting, almost like a gentle breeze that calmed a storm inside him. "Amina," he said, sitting down beside her, "I've been thinking a lot about what you told me, about the king and his restless heart." Amina nodded, continuing to weave. "And what have you learned?" Malik hesitated, unsure of how to articulate the growing realization inside him. "I think I've spent my life chasing something that isn't real. I thought wealth would give me peace, but it only deepened the emptiness. I don't know how to fill it." Amina looked at him for a long moment before speaking softly. "The heart is not meant to be filled with possessions, Malik. It is meant to be shared, to be given to others. It is through giving that you receive the greatest joy." Malik frowned, his brow furrowing with frustration. "But I've given to others. I've built schools, hospitals, I've fed thousands. What's the difference between that and sharing?" Amina set down the basket and turned to face him fully. Her eyes, deep and wise, locked onto his with an intensity that made him uneasy. "You've given, yes, but you've given out of duty, out of obligation, not out of love. The heart does not open to the world through obligation. It opens through love. When you give from the heart, you give not just to others, but to yourself. That is the key to finding peace." Malik felt a wave of frustration rise within him. He wanted to understand, but the idea seemed so foreign to him. He had always seen the world in terms of transactions, wealth for power, kindness for respect, but love? It was a word he understood in theory, but had never felt in practice. "I don't know how to love in the way you mean," Malik admitted. "I've never learned how to give freely without expecting something in return." Amina smiled gently, the corners of her mouth lifting in understanding. "You are not alone in that, Malik. Many people live their whole lives without understanding the true meaning of love.
But love is not a transaction. It is a force that binds us together, that connects us to the world around us. It is not something you do, but something you become. The air between them grew still, as if even the trees had stopped moving to listen. Malik felt something shift inside him, a stirring of emotion he couldn't name. It was like a door in his heart opening for the first time. "I don't know if I can do this," Malik said quietly. "I've spent too many years building my life on the wrong things. I don't know if I can change." Amina's voice was soft, but unwavering. "Change is not easy, Malik, but it is the only way to find what you seek. And remember, the greatest changes often come from the smallest moments of understanding." Suddenly, a loud noise shattered the calm of the moment. A figure appeared at the edge of the village, walking toward them at a brisk pace. It was a man from the city, his face red and flush with anger. He was carrying a letter in his hand, the envelope marked with a seal that Malik immediately recognized. It was from the very company Malik had once led, a company that controlled much of the city's wealth and power. The man was a messenger, and his expression was one of urgency. "Malik," the messenger called, his voice tense. "There's been a problem with the latest shipment. Your company is in danger of losing everything. If we don't act now, all your wealth will be lost." Malik stood up, his heart racing. For a moment, the calm of the village, the wisdom of Amina, the peace he had begun to feel, all seemed insignificant compared to the crisis unfolding before him. His hands trembled as he held the letter. He had built his life on this company, and now it was all slipping away. Amina stood beside him, her eyes steady as she watched him. She did not offer words of comfort. She did not need to. Malik could feel her presence, solid and grounded, as if she was the one anchor in a storm.
"Malik," Amina said softly, "this is your choice. You can return to your old life, build your empire back up, fight for control, sacrifice whatever you must, or you can stay here with us and let go. There is no right or wrong, only what will give you peace." For a moment, Malik stared at the letter in his hands. The future of his empire, the wealth he had worked for, all of it depended on the choice he was about to make. But deep down, something inside him had already shifted. Amina's words had taken root in his heart, and he knew what he needed to do. "I need time," he said quietly, almost to himself. "I need time to think." Amina nodded and turned to walk back toward the village, leaving Malik standing there, the letter still clutched in his hands. The world around him seemed to pause, holding its breath as if waiting for him to make a decision that would shape the rest of his life. What happened next, though, would be far more than a simple decision about business or wealth. It would be a choice about who he truly wanted to become. The village was still as night fell. The soft hum of insects in the trees, the distant sound of the river, and the faint rustling of the leaves filled the air, nature's steady lullaby. But for Malik, the world felt entirely different. The calm of the village, the wisdom of Amina, the gentle presence of the people, all of it now felt like a distant dream, one that he was torn between holding on to or letting go. He walked slowly, feeling the weight of the letter still clutched in his hands. Every step seemed to echo in his mind, amplifying the tension building inside him. He could return to the city, rebuild his empire, make deals, and regain the wealth he had lost. It was all within his grasp. But what would it cost him? Would he return to the same endless chase he had known before? Would he ever feel that peace again? As he wandered toward the riverbank, the faint glow of the moon reflecting on the water, Malik finally stopped. His feet were numb, his mind overwhelmed,
But one thing was crystal clear. He could not ignore the choice any longer. He sat down by the edge of the water, staring at his reflection. The cool night breeze brushed across his face, and for the first time in a long while, Malik allowed himself to be still. The village, the people, Amina, they had given him something far more precious than anything wealth could provide, a sense of belonging, of peace, and of love. It was a deep, abiding connection to the world around him, a feeling that he could only describe as home. A soft voice broke through his reverie. Malik. It was Amina. She had followed him, not in pursuit of answers, but because she knew what was weighing on his heart. She sat down beside him, her presence as calm as the river flowing beside them. "I've been thinking," Malik began, his voice low but steady, "about everything you said, about the king, about wealth, about what truly matters. I've spent my whole life trying to own things, control them, but nothing ever feels enough. I thought if I built the greatest empire, I would be happy. But I've learned that it's not the empire that brings happiness, it's how we choose to live." Amina listened quietly, nodding. She didn't interrupt. There was nothing more for her to say. The journey Malik was on was only one he could finish. "I can't go back to my old life," Malik continued. "I don't want to chase after wealth anymore, not at the cost of my soul. But I also don't know how to let go completely. I've worked so hard for what I have. How do I walk away from it all?" Amina turned her gaze to the stars, her voice soft but full of knowing. "Letting go doesn't mean losing everything, Malik. It means freeing yourself from the things that weigh you down. You've held on to power and possessions for so long that you've forgotten what it means to live freely. The choice before you is not between wealth and poverty, it's between peace and turmoil. You can still help others, build what you can, but you must learn to give freely, without attachment." Malik let her words sink in, like rain falling on parched earth. Slowly it became clear to him. It wasn't about what he did, it was about how he did it. For so long he had lived in the pursuit of more, always seeking the next step, the next deal, the next acquisition. But now he saw the world differently. It wasn't about accumulating wealth. It was about the value of each moment, the joy of sharing, and the peace that came with giving without expecting in return. "I think I understand," Malik said softly, a smile beginning to form on his lips. "It's not about having more, it's about being more." Amina smiled back, her eyes reflecting the moonlight. "Exactly. Life is not a transaction. It is a journey of growth, of giving, and of learning how to love." As they sat in silence, the stillness around them seemed to settle deeply in Malik's heart. The decision had been made, not out of obligation, but out of an awakening that was finally taking root. He didn't need to rebuild his empire in the same way. Instead, he could use his resources to help others, to spread the wisdom he had gained, and to live a life that was balanced, grounded, and full of love. The next day, Malik sent word to his associates in the city. He began the process of divesting from the large corporation he had once run. The transition was not easy. It was a complex decision, one that involved relinquishing the power and control he had clung onto for so long. But he did it, step by step, quietly, humbly. He knew that his true wealth lay in the peace he had found in himself and in the service he could offer others.
As time passed, Malik returned to the village often, helping where he could. He worked alongside the people, not as a wealthy businessman, but as a man who had learned the true value of community. He helped Amina in the fields, shared stories with the children, and assisted the elders with their wisdom. Though he no longer sought fame or fortune, Malik's life became richer than ever before. He had found a new way to live, one that was not defined by wealth or status, but by the love and connection he shared with others. And the village, which had once seemed so foreign to him, became his home. It was a place of peace, of wisdom, and of belonging.